guys. Thank you for joining this session on inventors, scalers, and enablers, really addressing the impact, the disruptive impact that deep tech has had. We've got an amazing panel of speakers lined up to give you their perspectives across a host of verticals. And we're really going to focus on the scalers and enablers for this session. We've had enough inventor sessions as part of NPC in other areas. So we're going to focus on the scalers and enablers and really help us understand the why, the how, and the what the deep tech is driving towards. So the why in terms of the catalyst, the need for such solutions, the impact, the how in terms of adoption examples at scale, not the POC type of examples, and the what in terms of what investors are looking for. We'll also tie that into India and its journey and its ambition in this space to see what have we done well, what could we do better. We've got a lot to cover in this session, so I've been told I can really play the Arnab Goswami and move our panelists along if we tend to deviate. So I apologize in advance, but the nation of audience members certainly has a lot on their mind and they'd love to learn more with that. So with that, let me jump straight into introductions of our various panel members. Let me start with Abidali Nimuchwala, also known as Abid. Abid is currently a venture partner at Dallas Venture Capital. He's had an amazing professional journey of over 28 years at TCS as well as at Wipro, an amazing reputation for bold transformations, laser focus on results, and unwavering commitment towards maximizing shareholder value. He's a postgraduate in industrial management from IIT Bombay. He loves traveling, enjoys Indian music, and is an avid chess player. And him and his wife live in Dallas with their 3 children. The next panelist we will have is Ganesh Subramanian. Ganesh is the founder and CEO of Stylumia. Stylumia is a deep tech venture solving real world problems in the fashion sector and lifestyle sector in the business space that is using cutting edge AI to solve some very interesting problems in that industry. Stylumia basically is trying to unscramble the process of how the brain works when shoppers make their fashion purchases. Prior to founding Stylumia, Ganesh was the COO of Myntra and scaled the business from $20 million to over $1 billion. Our third panelist is Dr. Gaurav Srinivas, or Srini. He's the Vice President of Data Sciences at Target. He loves problem solving and is committed to mentoring, startups and enhancing gender diversity in technology. Outside of work, he enjoys spending time with his family, reading, gardening, and he's a big space buff. Srini got his doctorate from the University of Oxford and is having a great time applying all those learnings at Target and elsewhere. The fourth panelist that we have is Jayandran Venugopal Jay. Jay is the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Flipkart and was previously the CTO at Myntra. Post completing his Master's of Science from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, he joined Amazon as an intern and later came back to India to set up Amazon's India Development Center and scaled that from roughly 4 employees to over 2,000 in 4 years. He's also been a mentor to several of our deep tech startups with NASSCOM, so thank you for that, Jay. Moving on, we also have Manish Singhal. Manish is the founding partner of Pi Ventures, which he set up in 2016. He's a 1992 electrical engineering grad from IIT Kanpur, and his professional journey has taken him from being a techie to an entrepreneur to now a VC. Pi has a vision of accelerating the development and implementation of AI startups in India. They have made 11 different investments thus far in some very interesting startups and have had 1 exit. Outside of Pi Ventures, Manish is a keen psychologist and volunteers his time to help people facing mental health issues. And he is also an avid amateur wildlife photographer. Next, from the fintech space, we have Ratna Prabha M, or Prabha as she's called. She's the Managing Director and Head of Innovation and Digital Transformation at Societe Generale, SocGen, and she heads up their India Solution Center. She also runs a very interesting catalyst cohort and accelerator program that was set up in 2016, which has helped discover more than 60 different startups that are aligned to the group's digital transformation mission. Her mantras in life are twofold. One, before you score, you must first have a goal. And two, there is no shame in not knowing. The shame lies in not finding out. Then we have two stalwarts from NASSCOM's DTC. First one is Millen, Hanchin. He's a director at Intel, and he's been there for over 21 years. He leads the global AI customer enabling engineering teams for optimizing AI apps that tie around vision, NLP, and others on Intel architectures. And he is one of the founding members of the Deep Tech Club. And then we have Anupam Sarinwala, who's also a graduate from IIT Kanpur and was last the IBM country leader and program director for their India Research Business Development Group. He has over 35 years of experience and is now helping companies grow exponentially. And Anupam was also a founding member of the Deep Tech Club. I'm your moderator, Sankalp. I'm with Nutanix. We were a deep tech startup 11 years ago when Dheeraj Pandey and team came up with the concept of hyperconverged infrastructure. And we've done well in that space and have now adapted that over to really helping drive hybrid multi-cloud infrastructure capabilities globally. So with that, guys, let us jump into the session. And what we're going to do is really start with the scalers and help understand the why and the how of how they've adopted the technology and how they've scaled it. So we have four scalers, Ganesh, Jay, Prabha, and Srini. Let me first start with the fashion industry. So if we can get Ganesh on stage with me, let's learn more about deep tech and fashion. Welcome,
Hi,
Ganesh.
Hi,
so Ganesh, fashion is what it's all about. So we thought we'd start with the big lights and all this other stuff. Huge industry globally, right? And I found one of your hypotheses to be very interesting. I spent 5 years at IT Technologies in the supply chain space, and we thought we had demand forecasting and all that down pat, but apparently it doesn't work in the fashion sector. Your hypothesis is forecasting and demand planning are ineffective at best and result in $750 billion a year in wastage in the fashion industry. Can you expand on that and just share how your solutions from Stylumia are helping address that issue?
Yeah, thanks, Sankalp, and thanks, NASSCOM, for the opportunity and your wonderful introduction. Let me just start by saying that we started Stylumia after experiencing being part of this industry over 15 plus years of making a lot of products, and more than half of what I personally bought and what my colleagues bought did not sell. Right. So we've been seeing this problem. It's not a problem from outside in. It's a problem that we have seen ourselves. And during my stint at Myntra, we asked this fundamental question. We are a tech company, incidentally doing fashion business,
right.
And how are we running this business, right? And are we running like any other retailer? And actually, the answer to that question was saying that we were running like any other retailer in terms of the supply side of the business. How do we make products and how do we buy products? And then we said, why not we use technology to understand the demand and then make products like that? Let's approach a very different way, a demand-led fashion, rather than a push-based fashion, which has been the case world over. To cut the long story short, in my stint there, we created, I would call it a data-driven fashion brand. It's a global case study right now, and the products perform 2 to 4 times better in terms of revenue velocity. That led me to believe that, if we can solve in a small way here, why not we solve this for the global fashion brands and retailers? And that's how Stylumia was formed. The fundamental problem in fashion is, if you just look at the supply side of the business, it starts 1 year ahead or 6 months ahead, predicting what would happen. And finally, when the products land up, we see that half of them do not work, right? So we said that why not we understand the consumer demand for what is true demand. So we create we invented, I would say we invented a true demand science.
Okay.
Now, what that means is collect data at internet scale across all fashion brands, retailers globally, including designers and fashion shows, etc., and come out with what is the real consumer demand at the various levels of the hierarchy, by the tier of business you are in, by the geography, product category, attributes. One is that, right? So that you get a demand pulse of it. And the second one is fashion is a very aesthetic business. That's why many prediction algorithms do not work very well. And because of constant change and the SKU you're launching has not been launched in the past, therefore past data in its own is not very, very relevant to say. So what we did was to create a very unique, ensemble machine learning algorithm, which not only uses the attributes, it uses every single pixel in the image.
Oh.
For what we basically say, you cannot articulate an art, right? Can you describe a face? We can never describe a face in language. The same way you can never describe fashion in attributes. Therefore, most of the algorithms today work on attributes.
Yep.
So we invented a new algorithm, which is a computer vision plus a text attribute-based algorithm using the client's own data and also data at internet scale. Now, what that brought is, it brought a lot of relevance angle to what you are thinking. So it helps any brand or retailer to validate, am I actually picking the right trend? Am I picking the right attribute? Am I actually growing the right categories? Right. So that's a fundamental difference, how Stylomia brings value. For just to give you in terms of the breadth that we operate from consumer insights on one side, which is pulse of the consumer on the one side. The second one is the quantity estimation. One is the what problem, and the second is the how much problem, because one can equally go wrong in how much. So he helped them solve the how much right through the planning cycle and right up to distribution, because distribution is also an equivalent important problem. Are you putting the right product in the right store? There again, we have the same prediction problem of very close to personalization. Whether am I sending the right? Our engine again uses taste match algorithms to figure out whether this product, what is the propensity of this to sell in a different store or a channel, including online channel.
So Ganesh, let me stop you there. Just tell me about the scale of the implementation or adoption. What's been your largest success story till date?
Yeah, in fact, see, to be very frank with you, right, and we are doing something very new. For the year 1 to year 2 has been a relatively slow journey.
Okay.
Right, because you have to convince, and that's where I keep telling people that you need to stay put. Right, do not estimate the future. And so we got entry into some big names, right? Whether it is a bestseller group, and we are talking about Fortune 100 companies. Some of them are in the panel today, and leading brands and retailers both in India and abroad. We have over 100 brands as customers, and select few Fortune 100 brands and retailers in the portfolio right now.
Right.
But the momentum starts only when you start proving value, and which takes a bit of time in fashion with the lead times.
Sure. Very well said. The other one, Ganesh, is where do you see this going? There's concepts of augmented shopping initiatives out there using AR, VR, things of that nature. I read about Finery in the UK that's really helping building automated wardrobe planning tools for women so they can shop across 10,000 stores. What's your take? What's the next big thing in deep tech and fashion?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a view of what the future look like. Navigating from a consumer demand to fulfillment, which is zero waste, right? We haven't talked about wastages. I think fashion industry actually creates the second most sustainability problem next to oil, right? So I'm going to give you a view of a future. In fact, a conglomerate of companies are working on solving this. I'm going to give you a storyline on this. Let's let's assume that Julie wants a dress from for an upcoming party.
Sure.
That's the first step. And Julie inputs her style preferences and measurements into the system from her mobile phone.
Yep.
And AI synthesizes Julie's preferences and big data signals, her digital behavior, trending styles, past e-commerce learnings into the recommendation.
Sure.
Then Julie uses an AR fitting room to try on the dress options and selects her favorite.
Right.
Now that goes into a 3D platform, which renders the dress tailors to Julie's measurements.
Right.
Robotic sewers and cutters assemble the dress, and Julie attends the party in her new dress. That's a zero waste fashion supply chain, and it's not far away. As we talk today, Manufacturing is moving from east to west.
Yep.
In US, a robotic factory has been set up with a conglomerate of brands and retailers, which is bringing all of this technology partners together, like us together, to come together and make a supply chain which is very, very nimble to the level of one. It may not scale to the full demand, but I'm sure it's a big, a good start.
Awesome, Ganesh. Hey, thank you so much. We're going to shift gears from now fashion to move on to the retail side of it with Srini on Target. Hang tight. We'll come back to you in a bit.
Thank you.
Thanks. So next, we're going to talk to Srini on the Target journey. So if you could bring Srini onto stage. And while we're waiting for Srini to join, Target's journey has just been meteoric, from $3 billion over 20 years ago to over $78 billion in revenue today. So in 2 decades, the scale has been just highly disruptive. 350,000 employees globally. You know, you talk about scale and success. I think Target has embodied it. You know, that red bullseye kind of sticks out. And that little dog that I'm told flies first class. So boy, that's got to be a great perk for the Target dog. So Srini, tell us about, you know, how you've helped drive that using data sciences at the underpinning for helping enable that scale. Some specifics at Target would go a long way.
Thank you, Sankalp. Thank you very much for having me as part of the panel, an incredibly distinguished panel. There's some numbers, and it's also incredible we're doing this conference, you know, in this format. Yeah. And this year has been different, right? It's been like no other. Yeah. So I'll just throw some numbers out there to set context and then go into how's Target navigating the journey. We have done more in excess of $10 billion of incremental sales in the first 3 quarters of this year.
In COVID times.
In COVID times. We have possibly gathered over $6 billion of market share in those first 3 quarters. And we're through our final quarter right now, and that closes later. And you'll hear more when those results get published. But that kind of tells you what's happening to the market. And if you go back and look at February, right, and all these are public data that Target publishes as part of our results, we entered February with a very normal looking month.
Okay.
And then suddenly we saw people driving into stores and beginning to stack up as the COVID, the pandemic related, you know, lockdowns were kind of looming. Of course, they call them shelter in place in the US. And as those started kind of appearing on the stage, people were stacking up. So the store started seeing a large uptick. Yep. But then it didn't stop there. There's a humongous shift in how customers shop. So much so that what we call the same day channels, which is your order pickup, people can come into the store and pick up, or they drive up and then we drop it into people's boot, or we use a third party called Shipped, who picks up from Target stores and delivers it to your home. All these together saw a humongous uplift in terms of, you know, the comps. If you just look at these comps, these are all upward of 200%. Consistently running. If I just look at Shipped as a channel, I think in Q2 or Q3, we were clocking more than 350% comp on what they're picking up from Target.
Right.
Now, none of this would have happened unless a whole bunch of other elements were coming together to support it. And I'll use just one more data point to kind of, you know, flavor that. If you look at the first quarter, apparel sales coming into the first part of the pandemic lockdowns, apparel sales just tanked, about 20% reduction on a comp reduction, right? But yet, in the subsequent months, as discretionary spendings began, they started cranking up, which now becomes a problem statement for technology to enable. And if we look at technology and the way we've addressed technology in Target is as follows, is a very strong notion of architecture. And architecture essentially being zoning of who does what and how they do it. So the core transactional systems that basically do what we call buy, move, and sell. The core retail processes. That's got to be cranking extremely efficiently, extremely accessibly to the business folks. And as the business went away to work from home for the first part of the year, and yet saw this huge change in purchasing habits, purchasing behavior of our guests. Our customers are what we call guests, and our employees are who we call team members.
Yep.
The team members started seeing a very different behavior of guests in terms of consumption, which then meant two things. One is, what do they want? How do we get what they want to where they want it?
Yep.
And the second part of the problem is, how do we get rid of things which they do not want? So if I go back to the whole apparel statement, how do we reduce the space optimization that we do around those kind of topics at that time, because we want space to be better consumed by other elements that the guests want at that point of time, right?
Absolutely.
So whole amount of the transactional systems and then the decision modeling systems that go on top of that. And many of these decision modeling systems then becoming part of the automated transaction systems, i.e. the decisions are being rapidly made by the system based on what data scientists will be informing it, right? And then we're beginning to then look for the additional signals that are not already part of the overall systems.
Right.
That's been the entire story. And if you look at it, I mean, the way we've been selling, and in the end, we're a retail company, the entire notion of technologies in the service of retail, and the motto of the company is to bring joy to our guests, right? So the entire technology arm has been operating easily at almost peak levels consistently for several months as we helped our guests get what they wanted. And quarter on quarter, you're seeing these results. They're extremely good, extremely strong. And in essence, that's happened because of a robust platform. I'll pause there. If you've got questions, I can.
So Srini, the deep tech side of it, I mean, your data sciences, what nuggets did you and your team discover to enable that uplift to happen and for it to scale? Target.com, I'm told, has 1 million online hits a day or whatever. What components of technology specifically played into that?
Very interesting question. And obviously, there's that much we can say publicly and what we can't say, right? I mean,
Yeah,
if I kind of use a notion, so there was this understanding of how the pandemic is influencing guest behavior.
Okay.
So there is the initial lockdown, and there's the kind of buying patterns that happen, categories that are heavily bought at that point in time, some returned or elements around that. And then there is, once the kind of the pandemic numbers in that district where those stores are begin to change or go into a different phase of the pandemic, you see a different kind of a buying pattern. And of course, you then overlay that with local events that might be happening, back to school kind of events that might be happening.
Right.
And you start seeing some very interesting signals.
Yep.
Now, the thing is, it's not as if all these are uniform across a large country like the United States. Each have their own little flavors moving back and forth.
Right.
Those are the signals that we were continuously mining them for to better inform almost like the lagging, districts for a better consumption of both what they needed on the store or what they didn't need in the store. So those are some of the kind of signals that we're working on very strongly through the pandemic.
Awesome. Srini, thank you for those insights. So we're going to go from fashion to Target, which was hybrid, both online and brick and mortar, to next Flipkart and Jay, which is purely a online e-tailer. Thank you. Hang around. We'll come back to you in a bit.
Thank you.
Thanks. So Jay, Flipkart. While we're waiting for you to come on the main stage, the India numbers have just been heavy. 450 million internet users, 350 million smartphone users and growing, right? You had a very interesting concept that you introduced, Jay, at Connect 2.0 just a while ago, where you talked about the N200M, which was your next 200 million customers adopting digital commerce. Can you talk about just kind of scale and magnitude, and what elements of deep tech are you planning that you can publicly discuss and talk about, help enable that future scale that we're talking about today?
Absolutely. Sankalp, happy to talk about that. First of all, thanks to NASSCOM for inviting me on the panel and helping us share some of these interesting stories more widely. So to your question, Sankalp, I think so we are all about democratizing the value proposition that digital commerce brings to everybody in the country, right? So we're enabling livelihoods and businesses of well north of like a few 100,000 sellers on the platform, and of course the selection, value, convenience, all of that you get as a digital commerce customer. We want that to penetrate to every nook and corner of the country, right? So as we all know, the first wave of consumers who adopted digital commerce typically were comfortable doing that in English. So that's why most of the consumer internet platforms in India launched and operated primarily in English. Of course, there were vernacular focused platforms specifically on the content side that also emerged. But for transactional platforms, English was kind of the de rigueur, right? So but what we are seeing over at least the last 2-3 years is that more and more of the new user share of e-commerce adopters is actually coming from tier 2, tier 3 and beyond cities, right? This means that we are now starting to get a new breed of customers on the platform who are much more comfortable interacting with the platform in a vernacular language of their choice. So that's why we made a choice to invest deeply in enabling vernacular languages on the platform as a first-class citizen. Of course, we did it for Hindi a couple of years back. And then last year we launched 4 more languages, the South languages, and now we have launched Marathi very recently, and we plan to scale up several other languages through the rest of the year. But if you look at the scale at which we operate, right, so we cannot do this without involving elements of deep tech in various aspects of platformizing it to operate seamlessly in vernacular. For example, I'll talk about a couple of examples, right, to tell you how deep tech plays a role in this, right? So if you look at the homepage, when you come on the platform, you see personalized offers, recommendations, merchandising banners, all of that stuff, right? So now think about hyper personalization on that, compounded by, let's say you want to do it across 10, 15 languages, right? So to be able to create high quality merchandising content, so we decided to use generative algorithms. So basically today, a lot of our merchandising banners and the high level of personalization that you see on our homepage comes from a generative algorithm that actually creates dynamic, rich banners with vernacular content, knows how to stitch things together without any human inputs.
So all translation, no transliteration, a full text to meaning translation kind of capabilities.
Correct. Yeah, and that's one area where we have had some really good success, and it's helping us scale these platforms so that the vernacular renditions of the homepage don't become second-class citizens, right? It shouldn't be that, okay, our primary focus on operations and all of that happens to be on the English or maybe the Hindi platform, but all the remaining 12, 13 languages that we would eventually like to support get any kind of experience that is shortchanged, right? So that is one example where we have used generative technologies to stitch imaging together, including, for example, rendering of shadows and 3D artifacts and all of that coming in. And you want to do it like, if you know that this person has a strong interest and intent towards a particular class of products, let's say within electronics, and you land on the electronics homepage, you want to generate a merch banner specifically for that person in the language of their choice with the right products embedded in it. It cannot be a generic thing from a catalog of a few million products, right? That's an example where deep tech plays a vital role to scale the platform. The other area I'll call out is, for example, user-generated content, right? So a lot of us are very used to using existing user comments, reviews, etc., to make our decisions, right? But of course, most of those happen to be only in English, right? So how do we then enable our vernacular customers to equally partake in the wisdom of the crowds, right? So we decided to actually use very, very interesting NLP approaches. Of course, now with OpenAI and GPT, which is also using a lot of generative technologies, right, to be able to do tasks that previously were thought to be completely impossible to do, right? So I think, of course, translation is one, but of course, even summarization and few other things are slowly starting to take shape as viable technologies. So we are experimenting with it. We have in fact launched user-generated content in Hindi, for example, taking the initial English corpus, and we are seeing good results in terms of engagement of the users on the page. The conversion rates for vernacular users on the page have gone up since we launched the feature, etc. So there are several such examples. For lack of time, I'll stop there with just these two callouts. But yeah, I mean, every aspect of enabling something like vernacular, including voice tech, for example, right? So we introduced the voice assistant for grocery, and we had so many interesting learnings on user patterns, behaviors, how vernacular users usage of voice as a navigation tool is very different from how English users actually tend to use the same tool. And why, therefore, our algorithms have to take those nuances into consideration while we do search ranking, list, and relevance and all of that stuff, right? So lots and lots of things.
So Jay, this is your V3, right? Vernacular, video, and voice strategy. So the OK Flipkart coming up or whatever, in that sense. That's great to hear. Last question I have for you, real quick. You've seen, the e-tailing space imbibing a host of these technologies. Yet over time, we've seen the revenue to cost performance still kind of stay in the red and not quite cusp out. Scale is massive, the efficiency should be great, but e-tailing is still not operating at a healthy profit margin at the end of the day. Just give me your thoughts on when do you see that pivoting, crossing the chasm? Great to know when this will kind of find that intersect.
Yeah, Sankalp, so this is how I'll frame the context, right? So if you look at India as a country, so the overall commerce pie of the GDP is about 860 billion, give or take, right? So this is retail commerce pie, right? Of the 2.53 trillion, we are talking about less than 1/3, which is driven through commerce, and of course, digital commerce as a share of that today stands at a very, very anemic small single digit percentage number, right? If you look at the headroom for growth, and we have seen that happen, and it has played out in so many countries which were slightly ahead of us on the curve. Right. Of course, we're not even talking about countries that adopted consumer internet and e-commerce 20 years back. But look at China, for example, and there are several countries where today the share of commerce, which is digital, is actually in the 20, 30%, 40% even, right? So countries like South Korea, for example, have gone way, way ahead, right? So the headroom is quite large. So we are just getting started here, right, in the country, right? So right now, everybody who is in the digital commerce space is really focused on the larger picture, 10 years, 20 years down the line, where you will have one of the largest, most vibrant consumer economies, being in fact, probably, if not the largest, definitely the second largest digital commerce economy, right? So it is about playing the long game, and it is not about squeezing EBIT right now and turning EBIT positive right now, right? So I mean, rightfully so, many companies are actually continuing to invest back into the business. Like, we have, of course, done a lot of work to really, really improve the profitability of the business, meaning the structural profitability of the business. But it is not with the intent to say that we will throw out free cash flow, or we will create a positive cash flow business right away. Right. So we are, in fact, across many categories, actually getting to a point where we are contribution margin positive or thereabouts, right? But we funnel a lot of that back into the business to expand capacity and build scale, acquire some of these new customers. There are only 120, 130 million customers today who have adopted e-commerce across all platforms, right? This is after, I mean, if you leave out people doing online travel and others, right? I'm talking about pure online commerce, right? So that can go to 500, 600 million, right? And in 5 years, right? So that is our focus area, and that is where everybody is squarely focused on.
Awesome, Jay. I love your optimism and bullishness on that. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Let's next get Prabha on stage with us and shift gears from the retailing, e-tailing side of the business to the fintech side of the house. And Prabha is part of SocGen. And while Prabha is coming on the main stage, SocGen CEO Prabha recently talked about leveraging technology and innovation to help co-build the bank of tomorrow along with your clients, right? And the scale and the size is, again, in the banking sector, investment banking, phenomenal. Can you share some quick examples of SocGen's kind of adoption of these, early adoption, current adoption, some of the other things that are in play for you guys?
Thank you for this question. Thank you, Sankalp, NASSCOM and Deep Tech Club, for this opportunity to share my views, and I'm already enjoying the conversation that I heard so far. So to answer your question, Sankalp, so it is a bank level decision, the group level decision to adopt technology at scale and be early adopters. I think this was a decision that we took in 2013-14, I would say. So the banking industry itself is a little bit more prepared for not only the pandemic situation, but doing contactless payments and going digital to enhance the consumer experience, customer experience, and also provide digital platforms for engaging the customers. So from that aspect, I think from a preparedness point of view, I'm quite happy on how we have been prepared. But are we fully there is a big question, because the banking ecosystem itself is continuously changing with customers driving it, the fintechs driving it, and the ecosystem of regulators, government policies, etc., also placing a huge amount of stress on the way the banks operate. So from a technology strategic standpoint, our group at SocGen has taken a few strategic measures to deploy digital platforms, digital channels to really engage customers, but most of all provide a very secure environment to customers to interact and have seamless transactions through the digital mediums. So with this, I think I can give you a couple of examples where we have created open banking platforms, or rather developed open banking platforms along with our customers and a few banks, our partner banks, or peer banks in the European context, where we've been able to deploy services and engage, collaborate with our peers and deploy as per the data protection norms of Europe, deploy those cross-asset platforms to the customers together jointly. So that is a huge step, of course, in the European scenario. But even better, I think we've been able to really provide those secure platforms where we are doing very thorough testing of our security, along with the governmental platforms as well as customers. So these are important measures where it's very collaboratively done at scale and digitally. The third important strategic area is, of course, data, right? So on the data, how do we really detect patterns and do predictive analysis, and also do digital assets custodian give digital assets custodian services very proactively, has put us on the leading side technologically by adapting to these much earlier than the curve.
Awesome. So, awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Let me ask you a totally different question. Cryptocurrencies are back in the media, right? The blockchain story has been talked about. Can you give me your views on, where is crypto headed? What's the adoption cycle curve on blockchain looking like? What are you guys thinking about it from SocGen's perspective?
I'll have to be honest with you that we were initially quite slow. Of course, there are enough experimentations going on. We are part of several key consortiums in Europe, especially in cross-border trading, on KYC document sharing, etc. I think there is a lot of proactive involvement from SocGen. We've also deployed startups. I mean, we've created startups and sold startups that are really providing these crypto asset bond services, as well as creating a lot of smart contracts for the oil trading and barley trading companies. So with that being said, I think that was the initial step that we took, since 2015 to 2017, and we saw a slightly slow period in adoption in 2019. Again, it has picked up quite well, where we are now the pioneers to really provide security token offerings, because we are quite ahead of the curve in making those offers of services, and then also providing digital crypto assets custodian services. These are very important steps from our point of view, from an external facing platform. But internally, we have a lot more usage for blockchain, especially in collateral management, in sharing of collateral, dynamic sharing of collateral requirements for trading across the businesses, sharing of KYC documents across, providing those open banking services for MSME small businesses, where we are able to create the pre-finance requirements and we're almost ready to go ahead and launch that at least outside Europe. So there are quite a few things that we're doing on blockchain from experiment standpoint, of course, on all the blockchains. But going external, I think it's more at a consortium level, and we are engaged that way. But I think from a curve standpoint, I think the blockchain adoption is still early. I think there is a lot of future for crypto assets. There is a lot of innovation around how these crypto assets are being managed inside and how they're being used to purchase, physical assets to moving assets to digital assets using these currencies. And banks are obligated to provide services in order to help the common folks manage this and feel safe about transacting using
I think that's a great view, brother. Thank you for that. I think influencing those decisions in India with the work that you guys are doing globally, I think can have a very strong resonance in terms of enabling similar services in our own country at the right point in time.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Let's now switch gears, guys, from the scalers to the enablers. We've got a couple of very insightful speakers on the panel. Let me first ask Abid to join us on the main stage. Brother, we'll get you back in a bit. So Abid needs no introduction, as we know, is currently on the VC side of the house with Dallas Venture Capital. And DVC has publicly talked about investing between $300 to $400 million in the deep tech sector in India, Abid, over the next 8 to 10 years, if I'm correct. The question I have for you, Abid, is, you can invest in the US and Israel, in a host of other geos. Tell me more about the why behind driving that to India. Clearly, it warms our hearts, but the opportunity cost and the risk to reward, would love to get your insights, because our market, inside out as well as the global market.
Absolutely, Sankalp. First of all, congratulations on a great panel, and thanks to NASSCOM for having me on it. I think it's heartening to see, even part of the answer to your question is, having spent 3 decades in the IT services industry, the question that was always asked, which was a difficult answer to provide, was when are we having the next Google or the product company from India? We've had fabulous IT services companies who are leading the world. And when do you kind of pivot to products? And I personally see both an opportunity through the Dallas Venture Capital initiative to be able to invest in startups who could produce the next big unicorns. Rather, already now we're the number 2 country in 2020 in producing unicorns, just after the US, but still far behind the US. But more importantly, I believe that there are 4 things that are required for the whole startup ecosystem to be really live in any part of the world, in any microsystem. And the 4 things are talent. And India has always had talent. There are a lot of Indian entrepreneurs have done very well in the Silicon Valley. So talent is not the question for India. The second is the capital. We've all moved from a generation of our parents investing in fixed deposits, we investing in equities, to now people making money available for a higher risk business, which is venture capital. And so the capital is now available in India for startups in India. The third aspect is what I put it as, the enablement, what Stanford has done to the Silicon Valley, the startup India or the digital India from the government, or, the financial reforms like alternative investment funds or AIF, and the IITs, the accelerators, and every large city in India now has accelerators, and the entire ecosystem of mentoring and stuff that some of us can bring is now present. The fourth thing is enterprises or customers, especially in the B2B business. India has been very successful. All the unicorns that you see in India, or majority of them right now, are the B2C unicorns. Because I challenge my friends in the business, is that the Indian consumer has been much more prone to adopting deep tech and new tech based startups within India. And that is why we have some of these fabulous unicorns that we've produced. Now enterprises need to do their part as customers to be able to adopt. Because if an Indian startup has to still depend on a US customer to be successful, then the whole premise of startups starting in India becomes questionable. So I think that is the fourth part that we need to work on, but I'm very excited with what is happening in there as well. Indian businesses are adopting deep tech startups for not only pilots and proof of concepts, which is already easy, but venture capitalists like us look at when does the revenue come in, when does the cash flow in, and I think that is starting to happen with customers within India. So I think Indian ecosystem is right. It is in part giving back to the community. For us, myself and my partners who set up Dallas Venture Capital are all, they've adopted the US as their home, but they're all born in India, and it's time to pay back by helping develop a venture capital ecosystem, and hence, hopefully getting the next big B2B unicorn out of India.
Abid, you're going to get a lot of emails from all our aspiring startups here to tap into that $300 to $400 million fund that you've planned for India.
Absolutely. You're reading all the emails at dallasventurecapital.com. You could just kind of upload your pitch deck in there.
Awesome. So, Abid, one of your passions is playing chess, right? And what Jay was talking about was a long play. In chess, we always think 5 to 10 moves ahead, right? So tell me, what do you see, right, in the 5 to 10 moves ahead that's coming up beyond the established kind of plays that we're seeing in cloud and IoT and all that? And what do you look for when you're going to make a bet on those? What are the key ingredients for you?
Absolutely. A great question, Sankalp. And something that excited me to be on this panel was the word deep tech.
Yep.
Because I think, today, whether it is artificial intelligence with COVID, AI, AR, VR, and natural language processing, and everything that makes things virtual, cybersecurity, all of this has become actually what I would call as work tech. It's part of what we do in our day-to-day lives and work. And deep tech is moving to the next frontier. Going forward, definitely, clean tech is becoming very big. How can you eliminate carbon, or, everything to do with right from the conversation in Delhi around pollution, or, other parts of the world where we're talking about global warming and cities going underwater, and how do we fundamentally address that through science? There's a lot of politics around it, but the final solution is around science. And I think that is going to be, in the next 5 to 10 years, big area. The second one is space tech. I think I don't need to say, because everybody's talking about Elon Musk, and then next the top 2 wealthiest people in the world now are investing in space tech. So that has promise. And the advantage of space tech for today is exactly like when man went to moon in the 60s. Is so much of technology gets developed behind it that helps every other sector. But in the next 5 to 10 years, doing a lot of things on the moon, or some of the areas closer to us in the near space is real. And I do think that's an area of the next frontier for us to conquer. The third one, which I'm very excited about, and actually COVID, in spite of a lot of hardship that COVID has created for a lot of us, the opportunities that COVID has realized is in biotech, in synthetic biology, and areas around material science, and a lot of things applied to what I would call as health tech in general. I'll give you an example of a company I came across as part of my venture capital activity, is a company called Retrotope. And they're looking at solutions which are very different for degenerative diseases. And they're looking at actually the fatty acids in your body. And, as you age, the fatty acids gets oxidized. And that oxidation happens because one of those complex if you remember your organic chemistry, the carbon and hydrogen bonds are kind of broken, because some of those bonds are weak in our fatty acids.
Right.
A lot of work happens. Everybody at some stage or the other through their families face Alzheimer's and dementia and other aging degenerative diseases.
Yep.
And they found a very unique solution, which is now almost in clinical trials for 3 very specific ailments, where they pick up an isotope of hydrogen called deuterium,
right.
And they apply it, insert it into that bond all through your life. So actually, you don't have to address a degenerative disease when you're 70 or 80 years old, but almost like a vitamin, you start taking it from early life. Wow. And you create enough of the deuterium within your, organic molecules of the fatty acids, so that the bond is strong enough between those carbon and hydrogen atoms, which get oxidized at 80, 90 years of age, which kind of the peroxidation doesn't happen. And that could be a permanent solution, and a very different solution from the traditional way. Through mRNA, you've seen what has happened with vaccines, order of magnitude improvement from 10, 12 years to 1 year. We're all now kind of on the cusp of almost having that vaccine for COVID. So those are some of the areas which I think are the next frontier over the next 8 to 10 years.
I mean, 125 is going to be the new 50 on that basis. With that, let me segue to Manish. Thank you, Abid, for those insights. Very interesting, especially on space tech and the biotech space. So Manish, obviously with Pi Ventures, Manish's passion in investing in some really cool startups plays through in their portfolio. So while he's coming on the stage, Manish had a very interesting hypothesis about Connect being the seventh sense out there, right? And in the years to come, he's talked about 50 billion connected devices storing so much information about us and our world that will almost be in a sensory action phase, right? Manish, a very interesting hypothesis. My question to you ties in with the privacy side of things. Is privacy a thing of the past at this point, the hype on GDPR, all that other stuff? Or will we need some swim lanes to protect some personally identifiable information? I mean, a chuckle is this whole Facebook, WhatsApp thing. But what are your views on the PII side of things as we move to more and more connected devices out there and connected experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the B2B space, privacy is much more easily taken care because you have contracts, you have channels which you can play.
True.
Privacy is more of a concern in a B2C space.
Yeah.
And being a deep tech investor, we typically, most of our companies are actually in B2B space. I think as long as you are from a B2C space, as long as you're using a smartphone, this whole privacy thing is actually a hoax. You've already given all your data to Google. It's all out there. So it's a mental game now, whether you want to support Mark Zuckerberg or Signal or whatever else is happening there, right? Yeah. But in a B2B space, people are taking care. Most of our companies do international business now, and they have appropriate structures, GDPR compliance, etc., etc. And therefore, we don't see much of an issue on the privacy side on the B2B space.
Okay. Very good. Now, on your portfolio, Manish, and building on what Abid had just shared, you've got Agnikul that does 3D printed rocket engines. You have Omi that does blockchain-based B2B supply chain financing. You've got Naramai that does ML-based breast cancer detection, right? Similar question to you. What is it that you're looking for in the deep tech space when you're coming to a go, no-go decision in taking that call on investing into that next big idea?
I don't think it's some one point go, no-go, right? It's more of a building your conviction as you interact with the entrepreneur and go deeper in discussions. One of our mantra at Pi has been, can you make a 10x difference? Can you make a daylight difference to the word out there on the back of technology? Okay. So let me illustrate that with a couple of examples with the names that you just mentioned. Maybe Agnikul is a great example, as Abid was saying it, on space tech. We believed in space tech around a year back, more by serendipity than by design. Agnikul, what they're doing is they are actually creating the technology which can help you get a rocket for a very small satellite, as low as 30 kg payload. And most of the satellite launches today, rockets are like 500 kgs and above, and you cannot scale them down to launch a smaller satellite. The cost will be very, very high.
Yep.
What they have done is they've created an engine which can be 3D printed, which is actually a unique technology, the only company in the world to have fully 3D printable rocket engine technology. And interacting to them, what we felt is that there's nobody in the world which is actually trying to solve that problem in such a disruptive way. So we felt that, with satellites going smaller and more satellites, more satellites going up there is a demand and supply gap, and which Agnicool can fundamentally kind of fill. Similarly, if you take Niramai's example, another disruptive company, breast cancer kills a lot of women across the world today. And in spite of all the advanced technology we have, detecting breast cancer early is still an unsolved problem. Most of the technologies like mammogram, hand examination, ultrasound, they all detect it late because they all are based on density. They are looking for a lump in your breast and then they follow on.
Right.
But by the time the lump is formed, or you're already into it. So what Niramai does is they don't look for lumps. They actually look for abnormal cell growth using thermal and AI. And therefore, you can detect it really, really early and solve it, right? So again, a sort of a 10x difference in both companies. And that has been one of the mantras that we have always followed in PI, that can we look at companies which can make a 10x difference to an existing old problem on the back of technology, and that gets us excited.
Excellent. Now, let me ask you a question. PI's focus has primarily been on the India side of the deep tech startup space. What do you think we can do more as a nation to help hyper accelerate success on this side? Is the government doing enough? What else would we ask of the government in support of this mission?
Sure. See, I've been in the industry for close to now 30 years and seen different stages of where India tech scenario is. And I do believe that today there are enough entrepreneurs trying to really solve. Actually, deep tech is as misused a word as AI is. So everybody can say deep tech, but real deep tech companies are actually coming up. There are many companies today that are doing this.
Yep.
What we possibly lack for a venture ecosystem to work is the capital flow. We are a little bit constipated ecosystem, right? So, the exits, we can scale our exits a little bit. Indian corporates have started doing business with Indian startups. That's a good sign.
Right.
We are also seeing some early signs of Indian corporates buying Indian startups, which is also good. But we need to do a lot more. We need to do 10x more of that, right? Similarly, local capital is hard to come by. Yep. In my previous fund, we are modest fund of $30 million. I had met 1,000 people to raise the $30 million, right? And it was hard work. And I'm on to my now second fundraising, and I don't anticipate anything easier. Indian capital is hard to come by, right? Wow. So we need to unlock some of those. India, from government side, yes, there is a fund of fund, which is distributed, which has been of great support. Right. They also launched what is called an electronic development fund, which was also good support, although that is going away possibly now. Right. So easy access to capital and easy access to, and lot more exits would definitely kind of churn the engine a little bit more.
Excellent. Excellent. Manish, thank you for those insights. And it's a great segue. The real deep tech companies piece that you touched upon. Yes, these are cocktail party conversations otherwise, and we toss these terms around. But let me invite Millen and Anupam on the main stage as the stalwarts from NASSCOM's Deep Tech Club Genesis to really give their insights on what NASSCOM's deep tech journey has helped us realize. So Millen, let me ask you the first question. Over the past several cohorts, we've mentored 78 different startups, right? From your perspective, what have been the most important lessons we have learned, really in the sense of what's worked and what could we do better?
Yeah, thank you, Sankalp. I think when we started in 2017, deep tech was not really something which was widely accepted, or it was early, at least in this country. But a few of us at NASSCOM who started the charter believed that that's going to be a next big thing. And that's when we started, the Deep Tech Club. And we really focused upon, the creators of the deep tech and not necessarily the consumer of the deep tech. So we set the bar very high. We really look into the IPs. We really look into, companies who are, doing fantastic innovation, etc. And that's when we started. And it was an experiment for us when we started the club. We had few ideas and we did not really know how it's going to come out, what are the key learnings. But I think to answer your question, I think the top, the requests that we get, or the problems or the requests that typically the startup ask, are pretty common. It's not like, it's very diverse, with the 78 companies, right? One is definitely what Manish alluded to, is capital. Money. Because deep tech, sometimes it requires a longer gestation cycle. So probably I think, money would be, and capital accessibility is very important. The second one is, definitely to solve some of the tougher problems and innovations. The way academia, or the way academia engages with some of the startups, etc., would be really, really important. Because in order to hardly solve the problem, you need that, connect. And I think what we felt was that's one of the areas where I think, we can do, as a nation, we can do fantastic, a lot of growth that is required. And the third one is, definitely, how do you get the first few customers and really get them a go-to-market initiative? And finally, for some of the mature companies, they ask for, okay, what NASSCOM can do to help us globally scale. For example, if there's a deep tech startup in the same area from 4 countries, why would somebody look into an Indian company? Why would they look into that? And how we can help them to be more visible. So these are some of the common themes emerging out of that. And I don't think we have answers to all, but definitely through a Deep Tech Club, we have started looking into addressing one by one. But again, we are at the very, very start of the entire journey, and we need to do a whole lot. And that's one of the reasons we are really bringing the ecosystem together, rather than just we few of us looking into it, where academia and then the enterprises and then, the startup ecosystem, and everybody will have to come together to solve some of these problems.
Awesome, Millen. Thank you for that. Can we get Anupam on at the same time, or we'll toggle back? We'll ask a question of Anupam with his Big Boy Blue experience. So my question, Anupam, while you're coming on the main stage, is really, we've got a big, hairy, audacious goal that the government of India has now put on the table for the product initiatives. And we met with Ravi Shankar Prasad, and his genesis was he'd like to see India grow from 8 billion to 80 billion in product revenues, right? The next Google, the next what have you out there by 2025. Very aggressive target. Right? If Anupam's not there, Millen, I'm going to throw that question right at you. Do you feel we're on track to achieve that? If not, what more, again, do we need to do beyond capital, collaboration, go to market? Is there a fundamental paradigm shift required for us to achieve it? And what company would be the bellwether for that for us out of India today? Millen, you're going to have to field it. I don't see Anupam coming on. Anupam, there you are. Yeah. Let's go. Big Boy Blue, would love to get that 35 years of insights applied to this.
Yeah, so I think they were trying to get me on stage. Sankalp, so if I heard your question about Ravi Shankar Prasad, that 8 to 80 billion. So I think that's obviously a challenge, but product companies, I do believe they scale up very quickly if they hit the right markets. So one criteria we always try to follow in Deep Tech Club is when we curate companies that they should be addressing global markets.
Yep.
So we believe, like the way Abid said, that there could be the next Google from India. So you need a couple of Googles from India to get from 8 to 80 billion.
Right.
And no doubt there are challenges when the India-based companies need to go global, address global markets. There are regulatory challenges they need to then have set up in US. So as DTC Club, we try to address those issues, whether they are policy related or go-to-market, global markets. India market is limited, no doubt, especially very price sensitive. So, right. so those are the areas which we look at. But as Millen said, we are starting the journey of products and deep tech products. And we're pretty confident that over a period of time, it could be years, but India has tremendous potential, especially the way we have the talent. A lot of US companies come to India for talent. It's just that we need to now reverse the trend that talent should address the markets and go global.
So Anupam, who do you think embodies the success in deep tech so far? Just some of the names, we've had some amazing companies through the various cohorts. Which one or two companies stick out in your mind, just as a plug for them and as well as a barometer for others?
Yeah. So one is Cyclops. Even though I was not mentoring them, I know Millen was very closely associated, and they have now got quite a bit of success in European markets. So maybe Millen can talk about Cyclops.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the ones I have mentored, they are still into developing technology. So I won't say that they have reached that threshold of calling a success. So Millen, you want to talk about Cyclops a little bit?
Yeah, I think just to look at that, there are few. If you look into the Deep Tech Club, we get companies from different stages, right? I mean, one is most of them are probably early stages, and then some of them are mature. And if you look into some of the probably mature companies who have got multiple customers, definitely we have got Stylumia, which is Ganesh is there, and I think we have got Yellow Messenger in one of the cohort. I think they have done pretty well. Cyclops, which is basically a neurovestibular device related, and then AI software. So I think we do have many of them. I think for people to really go and then look at the companies, where they are, they can look at NASSCOM and Deep Tech Club, and we have got all the 78 companies and information there, or they can reach us and we'll be definitely able to help them out. But there are quite a few, Sankar, different stages, but mostly the majority of them are slightly the earlier stages compared to a very mature startup in Deep Tech Club.
Awesome, guys. So Navya, I don't know if it's possible to bring everybody on stage from our panel just to wrap up. If that's possible, I'd love to have everybody on together. And we're just going to have everybody be a soothsayer, and I'm going to go one by one. And some of you have answered this already. What one deep tech technology are you most bullish about in the future? I don't see others coming on yet, but Ganesh, why don't you start the answer to that?
And Sankar, there are a couple of questions which is there. Maybe probably you can take and answer that as well. I've just listed them from the user.
All right, let me just look for those. Ganesh, while you talk about your bullishness, let me look for some of those as well. You're muted, I think. Can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Can I go ahead?
Yep.
Yeah, this is my personal vision, right? I see that humongous amount of energy goes into making fashion. And imagine a day where there are no fibers, it's electronics. You can wear clothes without going through the rigmarole of manufacturing of today. Wow. Zero energy and digital clothing is something that I look at personally as a vision for this space.
Awesome. Very forward looking. You're way out there in Star Trek with us. It's a great vision to have, a great aspiration on that side. Srini, your thoughts on that? You're a space buff, so that should excite you in one sense. Other ideas that you have?
There's lots of topics discussed today are incredibly exciting. The 3D printed jet engines. By the way, I'm an aeronautical engineer myself, and that too from IIT Bombay. So there's an equal split between IITK and IITB over here. In terms of to your specific question, Sankalp, on behalf of Target, I can say IoT is becoming a big topic for us. I mean, we've got the core retail platform in place very well. We've got a lot of the decision sciences working very well. That now means that we can buy, move, sell rapidly. The question then is, how do we derive other leverages? So Ganesh has himself been part of the accelerator program. We've worked with several startups like Stylumia included, where we have tried to find new ideas. We continue to do that, but at the same time, things like IoT or vision computing are becoming topics that we potentially want to look at in our accelerator program.
Interesting. Millen, Anupam, your thoughts on the same? What's the next big thing coming down the pike?
Yeah, I think in my view, I would still look into machine intelligence, and with 5G coming in, how that can fundamentally disrupt the overall stuff, right? I mean, we have been seeing these two technologies. They can not only just work in one vertical, but they have a way to affect in various verticals. Could it be the autonomous vehicles to finance to healthcare to whatnot. So I think I am predominantly more bullish by intelligence, and then 5G, which is a low latency network coming in, that will enable so slew of solutions. And I think for the entrepreneurs, etc., those two technologies and what they can do and what kind of a problem they solve, in my view, that will be fascinating.
Awesome. Anupam, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think Millen talked about sectors. So I know IBM has been making a big bet on quantum computing. So that's, I think, a huge area. And obviously, with all these cyber security challenges and so quantum computing algorithms, I think will have a huge scope, and that will have applications across sectors for sure. So that's one area which I will say. And I think Abid talked about space tech. I think space tech is huge. So.
Wonderful, guys. Well, thank you again to all our panelists for your insights. Really thought-provoking for us to kind of, reflect on and internalize. So scalers, enablers, access to new capital, access to very, very bullish ideas in terms of where this is headed. I think India's got a great journey ahead and a great role to play in the global development deployment of such solutions. And anything we can do to help participate in that journey, I think will go a long, long way. So thank you all for your time and insights. Jai Hind on that basis, and have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you, Sankalp.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thanks.